Hi geographers, it's time to talk about well-being, specifically the Great Divide. That's the rural-urban divide. Some learning goals for you today. Write these down. You're going to know the difference between rural and urban living in Australia and be able to use evidence. Okay, rural living in Australia. Now, everybody thinks that people who live in rural areas have high levels of well-being, but I was certainly shocked when I found this out. That's not true. The negatives of living in rural areas, in Australia specifically, but this is probably true for many countries, you got lower life expectancy. You got to die earlier. Why? Because you smoke more, you drink more alcohol, people do dangerous jobs, they drive more. If you drive more, you're more likely to be in a car crash because you got more chance to. All bad. And it's more difficult to get access to hospitals and education. Less big hospitals in the middle of nowhere. And surprisingly, even though the food is grown in rural areas, fresh and healthy food is more expensive in rural areas. Probably because they don't have massive supermarkets that keep costs down. It's also harder to get workers in rural areas like doctors and nurses and teachers. My first placement was at a school in Ararat, and they really struggled to hire teachers. Everybody wants to work in Melbourne because it's so great. It's amazing. Love it. There are positives to living in rural areas, of course. Stronger communities, you're more likely to know your neighbours and whatnot. There are more volunteer workers out there. And people feel safer. Don't underestimate feeling safe. Okay, so here's some differences. Urban's got a high standard of living and fast-paced. Rural's got a lower standard of living, but it's a bit more peaceful. Check it out. Cigarette smoking in cities versus in remote areas. Way more. Okay, figure out what's going on with this map. I'll just wait here. Yeah. So, if your country's in red, more than 50% of people live in cities. If your country's in blue, less than 50% of people live in cities. Australia is one of the most urbanised cities and countries in the world. About 85% of Australians live in cities. So there you go. What's going on with that graph? There's no horizontal axis, but what do you think the horizontal axis would be? Yeah, the horizontal axis would be time. So this shows that the urban population is increasing much quicker than the rural population, and it got bigger in about 2015. About 5 years ago that the world's urbanisation rate just ticked over 50%. Being able to read a map and a graph, wow, what a really useful skill. Right, but there are differences in well-being within cities, so I just want to briefly mention this. Houses in different parts of the same city cost different amounts. That impacts your well-being. If you have to spend more of a higher percentage of your income on rent or mortgage, then you can't spend it on something else. Houses are expensive. Average of 900,000 in Melbourne. It's over $1 million in Sydney, so. But then they're allowed to leave their house after 8 PM. Check that out. So if you're willing to live in Hobart, the house would be half the price. Right. What do you think's going on here? Now, there's no legend to tell you what the red and blue lines mean, but I'm hoping you can figure it out. CPI is Consumer Price Index. It's basically inflation. Inflation is what the average price of stuff goes up by each year. It's usually, the government tries to keep it at like 3% or less. So something that costs you $100 the next year will cost you $103. Yeah. So inflation slowly goes up, whereas house prices go up massively. Yes, you got it. You got it. The red line is CPI. You can also figure that out from the title. Base year 1986 equals 100. Actually, they both work. Anyway, and the blue line is the house price index. So as you can see, house prices go up in value way more than all the other prices combined. Yeah. The consumer price index, the inflation rate, is calculated by taking a collection of, I think it's like 20 or 30 common items and finding out how much they cost, and then finding out how much they cost a year later. Other things that go up, yeah, so the idea being that the average cost increase for stuff is whatever inflation rate is, so about 3%. But some things go up way more than that, like house prices. Another thing is private school fees go up way more than the average for inflation. Here is a map showing, or what do you think it's showing? Bearing in mind that urban areas are wealthier than rural areas, what do you think those colours mean if it did have a legend? Note where Sydney and Melbourne and Canberra are. Yep, you've got it. This map is basically a data map showing wealth. Dark red equals wealthy, blue equals poorer. I want you to read chapter 11.5, please. Answer these 3 simple questions, including the question stem in your answer. 1. Why do rural people have lower levels of well-being? How much more expensive is it to buy a house in Melbourne than in Hobart? And how does housing costs affect well-being? How do housing costs affect well-being, it should be. How might your well-being be affected if your housing costs were more expensive or less expensive? Here's the activity. Copy and complete that table. There's some evidence. What does this evidence show, and what questions might you have about this evidence, like where did they get it, why you might not believe it, or any other question you've got. Here's a video. It's city life compared to country life. Mate.
It's so lovely to see you again. After that ferocious feline chased you off, I never thought you'd leave your country cottage.
Yes, I don't much care for the city, but I really needed to buy some Stilton cheese.
The country mouse is on to something. Cities allow for large markets that provide specialized products like gourmet cheese.
You can't buy fancy cheese or much else that's good in the country.
No, I've got Amazon Prime. I can order almost anything else online.
Amazon Prime is a great example of how transportation and logistics can deliver a wide range of products across America and the world.
You can't sample cheeses when shopping online. And there aren't great specialized services like whisker waxing salons out in the country.
But when I order online, I can avoid crowds. I hate lines and I hate traffic.
The average commute time for a New York City resident is 40 minutes. The average commute time in Montana is just 18 minutes.
I just listen to music when I'm stuck waiting.
Well, I have a short commute and I can hear the crickets at night.
True. You don't have to deal with traffic, but jobs pay more in the city.
On average, wages go up by about 5% as metropolitan area density doubles.
Sure, you make good money, but what about housing? I'd never pay such sky-high rent.
Housing prices also typically go up by about 5% as metropolitan area density doubles.
Yes, but I have the best museums, shows, and restaurants.
This cafe is very nice.
City dwellers basically share the fixed costs of supporting a variety of cultural institutions. Urban density also increases the bump rate, the chance of meeting someone new and exciting.
But cities are dangerous.
I always feel safe in the city. There are so many eyes on the street.
Crime is an unfortunate reality in American cities, but most have become a lot safer since the 1980s. In fact, New York City has a lower murder rate than the country as a whole.
And really, the best thing about cities is the endless novelty. The new opportunities, the new ideas, the new rodents. It's all so exciting.
Give me my warm, safe cottage any day.
Okay, but while you're visiting, want to catch a show? You know, Cats is playing.
Here's another one. It's called Country v City.
The world is pretty evenly divided, those that live in rural areas and those that live in cities. But how do people decide which of these two will be the right fit for them and make them happy? Can a place even make you happy? I dove into research to see who's happier. This study says that rural people are less depressed, but then this book shows how cities make people happier. Then again, this study concludes rural dwellers are actually happier. So what's the truth? We asked people in Los Angeles about their happiness.
Well, we're here on the streets of Los Angeles, the big city, talking to people about happiness. First question, are you happy?
I mean, I feel like I'm not that happy when I'm in the city. Well, I'm actually moving because I'm kind of not happy here.
Okay. Are you happy?
Very happy.
You're very happy.
Very happy.
Are you happy?
Sometimes. I wouldn't say all the time, sometimes.
So, after those mixed answers, we headed out to the country, stopping at the Halfway House Cafe for good old-fashioned food and a chat about happiness.
So I'm here with Sandy.
Hello.
Are you from around here? Or
Yes, I've lived here 30 years.
Sandy, are you happy?
Yes.
Well, there you have it. Are you happy?
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Absolutely. Great area. Great place to live.
Are you happy?
Yeah.
Oh, well, great.
I'm happy.
The rural people did seem happier, but was their happiness actually connected to living in the country? We asked some of the same people if they thought location affected their happiness.
Do you have a lot of hometown pride?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. I went to school here. My kid went to school here. Yeah. I know all these people. Yeah. This is my life. This is my town.
Do you feel like you'd be happier in a rural environment?
I love the country, but the cities bring everything. So you can go to the country, but not to live there.
I don't really like going to the city at all.
What things make you happy? Do you think?
I do a lot of exercise outdoors, so I mean it just helps me relax, and I feel like those things make me happy.
So, it's not really a debate between rural and city life. People that are happy are often just a match to their homes. This actually makes sense because the Gallup Healthways Well-Being Index has liking where you live as one of the 5 main indexers for overall well-being.
So, if you like where you live, you could be one step closer to happiness.
Okay, here's a fun reflection activity. You're going to come up with an analogy. An analogy is where you try to explain something being like something else. Like Tom Hanks in Forrest Gump said, life's like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. So he's comparing a life where you don't know what's going to happen to a box of chocolates where you might get anything. It doesn't really make sense. Most of the time, the chocolates, you know what's in them from the packet. But anyway. Okay, so you're going to do an analogy. So the city versus the country is like what versus what. You just have to do that. Right, reflection activity, analogy, and then write your analogy underneath it. Thank you so much for participating in today's lesson. Yes, and never forget to keep it real. Ha ha ha.